Welcome, everybody. I am beyond excited to be up here today. I talked to my team yesterday internally, and I talked about how humbled I was to be leading this company because a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, a lot of the things you're going to hear about with Pop and some of the other things that I'm working on, a lot of them just flat out weren't my idea, right? I wish I was that smart. But I'm out constantly talking to clients and talking to our partners and talking with people internally at Trace3. And some of the most impressive things that you're going to hear on stage during this event came from the people in this room. And I can't tell you how important it is for us that reciprocal relationship occurs and how much specifically I get out of it in just interacting with all of you. I think there's always a chance for us to evolve and to learn. And I think, there's times where we think we're so successful or think we're so smart that we don't need to learn anymore. And I think one of the best things about Trace3, this group of people, and a lot of the clients and partners that we deal with is we're all still very open to that. So I think that shows in the attendance that we have. We have, I think, over 600 people at the event. That's, I think, 150 or 200 more than last year. So super excited about it. The lineup is, lucky for me, it's most of my mentors. Tom Mendoza, who's going after me, I have been following his career pretty much since I started mine. He's helped me with so many things, including speaking. And if I screw up today, Tom, you don't have to take any credit for that. And it really is neat to have him here up on stage. I think he was here 3 or 4 years ago and gave a speech about culture, and the speech he's going to give today, I can't wait to hear because it's going to be really about him and how he has come up in his career as an executive. We also have Ashim from Greylock, who's wildly impressive. We've got Rajiv. We've got Patrick Lencioni, who wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. He was here last year. He's going to do kind of the second half of that speech this year. So for me, I'll probably be taking as many notes as you guys. This is an exciting year. And for me today, one of my favorite topics that I've been talking about for the last 8 or 9 months is this topic of being versus becoming. And I think the simplest way to explain what that means, if it seems a little bit confusing, is think about IT, right? In the last 5 or 6 years, IT kind of would get put in the corner as these are the guys that keep the lights on, right? And that is their job, is to keep the lights on. And now we're in a situation where we're kind of transitioning, and we could be in a situation where there's a lot of companies that are proving that technology is actually driving the business. Technology could actually drive the P&L. You could drive top-line growth, bottom-line growth. It's not just a cost-cutting kind of a scenario. It's not a keep-the-lights-on scenario. But in that transition, it's hard. So while you guys might have been great at being an IT organization that keeps the lights on, you are going to need to become an organization that affects the business in a big way. Trace3 is in the same kind of a situation, right? We think that the traditional VAR era is going away, and we need to become something much greater than that. So that's the basic premise of what we're going for. I'd love everyone, I know everyone probably just had turkey for lunch, so where's Mark Fleury? This guy falls asleep in every speech I give. Where's Mark? I'm going to ask everybody just close your eyes for a second. And Mark, remember, we're going to open them. And I'd like everyone to think for a second about what kind of organization you'd like to become. So seriously, close your eyes. Think about the organization that you want to become. Maybe you're great at being something today, but you probably want to evolve and become something else. Maybe you want to have a big data practice in your department that is manipulating data and figuring out how to drive sales in your organization. Maybe you want to do something with cloud that's going to offer 5 or 6 services that your CFO never thought of that's going to allow you to drive revenue. Now I want you to picture yourself in a bathroom stall. Okay, you can open your eyes, Fleury. So when I was 17 years old, I was constantly spending time in the bathroom. It's slightly embarrassing. I ended up marrying my high school sweetheart. I met her when she was 16 years old, God bless her. And we would go see a movie, and we'd go to the movie, and we'd get the popcorn, we'd sit down, and the previews are going. I was like, hey, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you get, the stomach. And I'm like, I'm going to be right back. And I would come back after I went to the bathroom, and I was like, okay, fill me in on what happened. And she's like, Hayes, you've been gone for 45 minutes. I can't fill you in on that much. But I was living with that on a day-to-day basis at that age, where there were two conditions I had. I had a lump where I shouldn't have a lump, and then I had this chronic stomach issue where I was always having to go to the bathroom, and I was spending a ton of time in the bathroom. So I did what anybody would do. I went and saw a doctor, and I go to this first doctor, and at 17 years old, I walk in, I'm like, hey, it's kind of weird, but here's what I'm dealing with. He walks over, puts his hand on my back, and says, Hayes, you're 17 years old, you're a young guy, you're going to be fine. Take some Pepto, don't worry about it. And at 17 years old, you kind of want to believe that. For me, that's a long time ago, but if you think about yourself as a teenager or as a young person, right, you kind of think you're invincible, and when a doctor sits there and tells you you're invincible, you're going to believe him. So fast forward, I take a trip through OCC, junior college. Anybody that has that on the resume, I hire them. And then I went to Boston University. Why are you laughing? I go to Boston University, and at Boston University, now the lump starts to grow. It turns out the tumor starts to grow, and I'm like, and the tumor's not in a good spot. I'm on the swim team, it's awkward. And I'm like, okay, I go to see another doctor. This doctor is cool. He sits me down. He's at the BU Medical Center or walk-in clinic or whatever. He's probably seen some crazy stuff. And he does take some blood. He actually takes a little time, and he works with me on it. He comes back in 20 minutes later, and he's like, so I'm going to give you a prescription for amoxicillin. And if the swelling doesn't go down in a week, let's come back in and we'll talk about it. I was like, man, it's not really swelling. Like it feels like a tumor, like it's growing or something. This seems bad. He's like, just trust me. Take the antibiotics. Take a week. Come back. So I talked to my mom at that time like once a month. Boy, sons never remember to call their mothers. I'm sorry, Mom. But I talked to her about 4 days into the antibiotics, and I tell her what's going on, and she basically, from Texas, like slaps me across the phone line and is like, what are you doing, you idiot? You need to go see a urologist. Go see a real doctor. I see a urologist who's a specialist, and in about 15 minutes, he walks in and tells me I have cancer. He knew immediately. There are only 2 signs, chronic diarrhea and a lump on one of your testicles. I had testicular cancer. He knew it. This was before it was cool, too, before, Lance Armstrong and all those guys. So it was literally like that fast. He walks in, and I am not telling you this story because it's like, oh, woe's me, Hayes had cancer. It turned out all fine. And I have ADD. If it turns out that you do feel bad that I have cancer or had cancer, and you want to hug me when we're out in the hallways, that's fine. Go ahead, give me a hug, and I'll give you a hug back. But I probably won't remember why you're hugging me, so it'll just be weird for both of us. I don't tell this story really for any other reason except to say, wouldn't it be so cool in business if we had really, really obvious signs like that? Really obvious signs of what was wrong with the business? I mean, how many of you have a team meeting, you come up with a great plan of something you want to roll out over, let's say, a year, and 4 or 5 months into it, you just have no clue why it's not getting traction. You don't know why it's not working. Wouldn't it be nice if you're like, it was just like a sore shoulder and you could just go get your rotator cuff fixed and fix it and you could figure that out? It's not that easy. One of my first points on becoming something is a lot of us will focus on, financials or Excel or being smart in the business, and Patrick will talk about this. The first thing you have to focus on is your health. So when something's not working, you're 6 months into it, and it's getting a little traction in spots, but it's not working the way you wanted it to, one of the first things we'll usually do is try to bring in a doctor. We'll try to bring in a doctor to fix it. Turns out, there's a lot of crappy doctors. Wouldn't it have been so great if those first 2 doctors came to me and they were like, Hayes, I just want to be honest, man. I got no clue what's wrong with you. I think I'm going to send you to a specialist, but that's not what they did. And so many consultants that I've dealt with, and I don't know about you guys, it's kind of funny because we are kind of an IT consulting company, and I don't like consultants, but they will come in and you'll tell a consultant what your issues are, and they'll just kind of like mirror them back to you. And you're like, well, I already knew what my problems were. That's not really helping me at all. So we were having some initiatives that we were running through, and Timothy Abbott came to me after about 6 months of not getting a ton of traction. It was actually about 1.5 years after not getting a ton of traction. And he handed me this book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni that they're going to tell. You're going to hear a lot about Lencioni, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But about 80 pages into that book, I realized that I needed to do a table group offsite. The table group is Lencioni's company. And how many of you guys watch like The Kardashians or The Bachelor or anything like that? I don't. My wife watches them. I don't watch them. But if they're on, I might see a little bit of them. Like that Jake guy's the worst bachelor of all time, in my opinion. But what happened at Trace3, we go from 100 million to 186 million, then 186 million to over 300 million. That happened in 2 years. So that's almost 100%, year-over-year growth with my fuzzy math. And from the outside, it looked like we were absolutely crushing it. Looks like we were just killing it. On the inside, we were a better reality show than any of those TV shows. There was a coup where I got demoted, I got kicked out of the company. I got asked to step down. For a week, I did step down. A week later, they asked me to step back in because they realized, it's not so fun, right? Dealing with all of the stuff that you potentially have to deal with when things aren't getting the traction they need to get. When you grow that fast, everything breaks. For all of you that are, at companies that are growing 100%, 200% year over year, you know how fast things break when you're growing that fast, and then everybody starts pointing fingers when, departments aren't getting what they need from other departments, and you have all this stuff. So I get handed this book around that time, and we go and do this offsite, and the offsite was probably one of the best experiences in my career. In that offsite, I realized that I was screwing a ton of stuff up as a leader. Talks about conflict, talks about cohesion, talks about meeting cadences. Turns out most of my meetings, I was just spending time in the bathroom. I don't know if you guys feel this in your meetings or your QBRs or all the stuff that you have to do, if you feel they have an insane amount of value for you as an individual. But in most cases, what we were doing at Trace3, I was doing meetings and I was pontificating, right? I was turning every tactical meeting into a strategy meeting. It was kind of a disaster. So you get all this feedback when you do this offsite. And you realize that the reason things potentially aren't getting traction when you're rolling out a new initiative is because you have a meeting with your team, and you've got these people in the room, and there's probably 3 or 4 that are super vocal and nodding and talking about like all the things they want to do with the plan. 3 or 4 probably aren't saying anything. And when you leave that room, this initiative that you spent so much time on, that you want to roll out so you can become something, 2 or 3 of those executives are probably walking to the water cooler. They're having people walk up to them and ask them, hey, this stuff that the boss wants to do we really have to do that? And they're like, no, actually, if we did it, it could collapse our business unit, and I might end up reporting to one of my peers. No way are we doing that. The table group covers how to handle all of that. We've already started putting clients through it. You have to focus. If you're going to become something, if you're going to try to change your organization and do something difficult, you're going to have to get healthy first. It's the main takeaway. And point in case, after we did it, I had a couple people leave the company that went through the offsite with us. One of them, to this day, I just love dearly. And I sat down with him and I said, hey, we wrote a playbook called Quality of Earnings back in 2009. For 3 years, we were trying to convince everyone that there was not value in just infrastructure. We had to add all of these additional services. We've made all these investments. You have built this company with me. I want you to be honest with me on this exit interview, because we loved each other. There was no reason not to. When the top people in the company would come to you and they would say, this quality of earnings thing that Hayes keeps writing books about and blogs about and all this, do we really have to do that? Because I am super busy. I don't have time for all this new and different kind of stuff. Do we really have to do it? And he looked right at me. He's like, I would tell him, no, don't worry about it. Hayes is crazy. I guarantee you there's 3 or 4 people on every one of your teams that does that to you. And they aren't doing it to be jerks. They're doing it most likely because people like me are not giving them a chance to speak their mind in the meeting. So what happens? They end up and they go out speaking their minds to all the people that they shouldn't be. You have to leave your meetings as a cohesive team, accountable to each other, voice all of your concerns in that room, and when you get out, you cascade a message down that is consistent so that everybody can get behind. Trace3 did those offsites Q4 of 2012. We grew from 320 million to 420 million in 1 year. We did it, that's neat, right? But the cool part, we did it with exactly the same headcount. To me as CEO, that was the big deal. Because what happens now, once you have an engaged group of people, a healthy organization where people feel they can speak their mind and be really relevant to the mission and be heard, engaged employees will produce 2 to 3x what people that feel shut down will produce. And the problem is you won't even know what's going wrong. You won't be able to see why it's not working. So step one on becoming something, you have to find a good doctor. If you're spending a lot of time in the bathroom, you've got to find somebody that can help you guys get healthy. How many of you are on Twitter? I run a tech company, so I discovered this Twitter thing like a year ago because I'm super in the know. And I jumped on Twitter, and it's like @Hayes Drumwright is my name for Twitter. And I didn't realize that's a lot of characters, and I probably should have shut that down. I understood nothing about it. And I forced everyone at Trace3 to join and follow me. Like I sent like 4 emails and threatened people if they didn't do it. And it's really because I'm narcissistic and I wanted a lot of followers. So I had like 300 people immediately. And I guess there's apps that can help you with this, but very quickly within like 2 weeks, I was down to like 150. So I guess I don't tweet that coolest stuff. Which, but if anybody wants to follow me, I am working on being cooler on Twitter. So, everyone, that's not where you're supposed to laugh. So, I do actually follow some really intelligent people on Twitter, though. And one of the stories I really started reading a lot about, and this is the second part of becoming something, in my opinion. I started reading a lot about BlackBerry and Nokia, and man, the journalists were just crushing them. The journalists were constantly ripping on them for, man, you got a smartphone sitting right in front of you. How can you guys not figure this out? I mean, how hard is this to figure out that Apple and Google are coming at you and you need to transition off your old model to your new model and you need to change? And that drives me nuts. These are companies that completely innovated a space. When you talk about becoming, like nobody had done the email on the phones, the flip phones, that was Nokia. I mean, this was truly innovative people at these companies that cornered a market, but then possibly got happy just being that company and not looking at how could we possibly create value and become something more and stay competitive as new technologies come out. But then there was one journalist that actually wrote a story and said, maybe one of the ways to look at this is what kind of boards were they dealing with. So he compared Apple's board, which was a super innovative, like powerhouse, who's who type of board, constantly pushing and looking for new ways to innovate, to BlackBerry's board, which was really a very talented board of operators and financially brilliant people. And they were comparing and saying, maybe that's the reason that Apple really pushed. But I think it's because they didn't eat their babies. I know that's a controversial one, right? That's why I like it. You've got a situation in management where you go to these teams and you say, hey, it's clear we need to innovate. We need to get an app store. We need to get a smartphone. This keypad thing, I don't think it's going to work anymore. And what happens, especially if you're not healthy? The management team's going to walk out of that room, and they're going to go down to Joe, who's making all the products, and say, Joe, turns out we got to throw out what you have. You are the father of this beautiful phone, this BlackBerry, and we're going to need to throw it in the trash. We're going to need to cannibalize it because the boss is saying that we've got to get into this new space. And I don't know any of this for a fact, but I can guess, right? Because I know people pretty well. What probably came back up from Joe was 50 ways to improve the current product. 50 ways that they didn't have to eat his child and throw it in the trash. He did not want to cannibalize it. They knew what they needed to do, but sometimes letting go of what you have birthed is so hard, right? It's so hard to do that. So apply it to us. Maybe it's not a product, maybe it's people. How many of you have a storage division and a virtualization group and a security team and, hopefully nobody has a server group anymore, but maybe you do, right? You might have to eat that. You might have to have a whole different organizational structure. I mean, how many of you think in 3 years you're going to actually have an organization that looks like a big data team with a cloud team with a converged infrastructure team, and maybe just flat out a team like we have that does nothing but new technology? How many of you have a team that does nothing but brand themselves to the business and go out and collect business requirements so that they can make sure that IT is driving the business forward? It's going to be hard, because that first example I gave, you're going to have a situation where you've got all these VPs running this group, all these directors, and you're going to say, man, we want to collapse this, and you, and you, who used to be peers with you three, you now are going to report to them. Are they going to fight that? It's going to be hard. So point one, you're going to have to be healthy first. That's why I start with that. And point two, you're really going to have to look at what you're going to have to cannibalize, and you're going to have to figure out how to, as a team, how to really effectively do that in a way that doesn't cause fear. So the third point, how many of you have heard of instant scale? So instant scale was this brilliant idea that I had forever ago with a bunch of people at Trace3. And the idea was pretty simple. Well, first, let me step back a second. One of my favorite things about being a leader, my favorite things about this job is I get to set an end state. Right? I get to set an end state, and then I get to drive towards that end state. And for me, that's super fun, because it's like creating a vision, it's being strategic, and then it's going towards it. So instant scale, I had this idea. We look at 30 companies a year roughly back in the day. This is back a long time ago. And we would pick one of them or two of them per year, and we would carry them. And so I had this brilliant idea that I was going to go to the executives of these companies and say, hey, you should give us stock. And I tried it for like 4 years. And the plan was, we have all of these clients. We are going to take your product, which is amazing, and we're going to deliver it to these clients. And that's more valuable than money. Clients are more valuable than money. That was my strategy, my theory, right? But it had never been done before. No one had ever done that. Performance-based warrants, partner stock option programs, they'd never been created. There's tax problems. So I just got no after no after no after no. It was like being married. It's just constant. And so 4 years into this, I sit down with one of my best friends, Adriel Lares, who was at the time the CFO of 3PAR and had raised $100 million and taken them public and was so much more successful than me, and I really don't like him that much. But I sit down with him, and I've known him forever. I do love him. And I was kind of crying to him. You know, I was like, man, it's so frustrating, because I know this is going to work. I know what I'm saying is true. And he's like, Hayes, you don't have the brand equity to pull this off. You know, you're going to these entrepreneurs that are massively successful as a nobody and trying to get them to buy off on this thing. Why don't you just do things the normal way once or twice? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, why don't you just ask if you can invest? Just ask if you can put money in. I'll introduce you to Ashim at Greylock, and just tell him what the idea is and ask if you can participate in the round. He's like, all right. I go out. I have a lunch 4 weeks later with the CEO of a company, and I sit down with him, and I'm like, we love your product. We've looked at like 45 this year. What you are doing is totally revolutionary. We would love to carry it and bring it to our clients and have them participate with it. I understand that you're raising a round of funding right now. All the people at Trace3 that are accredited investors, we've set up a fund, and I would like to, it's not for me, it's for the whole company. I'd like to let them invest so they could have an equity play with you. And you know, I'm getting ready for my no, and he goes, that sounds terrific. And I literally was like, crap, and I almost hit my head on the table. Because I'd spent 4 years of getting no's, and every no I got, Riverbed, Data Domain, Palo Alto, they all turned into like $2 billion companies. And when I found them, they were like 60 million. It was so frustrating. And right when I was going to bang my head on the table, the waitress came and brought our appetizers. And I had this like epiphany as I was putting my face in the shrimp cocktail. Sometimes these huge ideas, they need appetizers. Sometimes when you set an end state that's so massive, they need appetizers, because you might not have the brand equity to pull it off. So I kind of had this theory like, okay, you know, this entree that you've created, right? If I have appetizers, maybe I can lead people to water with it. And this literally happened in the last 12 months. I've had 2 entrepreneurs come to me and say, you know what, Hayes, I don't really need your money. What we really would love is access to the client base if you think our product has value, and we would give you shares for that. And I was like, just give me a bag to breathe in. I can't take this. So it really did happen, but I'm at a point now, and you'll see this with our big data practice and with our cloud practice at Trace3. We understand those are huge entrees. You might not have any use cases. You might not know exactly how you're supposed to use those products. We've learned from I make tons of mistakes, and we've learned. We've set up appetizers for you like breadcrumbs the whole way with workshops and everything else that you're going to hear about that will give you a chance to figure out how to sell to your business these ways that technology can start driving the business. So you've got to be healthy. You've got to eat babies. And you're going to need to have some appetizers for your entrees if your brand equity is not strong enough to sell the end vision right from the start, which even if it is, it's probably still a good idea to set up some small wins along the way to get people on board. So we do all this stuff. We're cascading messaging. We're totally kicking butt. We're halfway through the year last year. And how many of you have been to any of our VC briefings? So this program we have, you'll hear about, it's like magic. It's like the coolest thing that we've probably ever done. We're super excited about it. And 6 months into the year, nobody's doing it. And I know no one's doing it because here's how the tactical or strategic meeting started with my team. I have everybody walk in. I swear to God, everybody's carrying like a 2x4 and just hitting it in their hand. Because Daniel Pink was on stage a couple years ago. He wrote that book, Drive, that if you haven't read, you should all read. And he talked about the ways to motivate people: carrots, sticks, money, relevance, all of these things, autonomy. We had tried carrots. We're 6 months in. We had done everything Lencioni told us to do. We had cascaded the messaging. We felt we were healthy. We felt that we explained the why really well, but people just weren't embracing it. And now the team was ready, and I got to admit, I was pretty close to it too. We wanted to beat the crap out of some people. Like, hey, we've laid it out for you. Why aren't you doing what we want you to do? And so as the meeting started going, the team started getting riled up. Maybe we could penalize them for this. Let's set up buckets in their comp. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's hurt them. Let's make them go our way. And I sat back, and I just looked, and William Wallace popped into my head. How many of you have seen Braveheart? So, not William Wallace at the end where he's like getting his intestines pulled out, but William Wallace would can you picture him with all that face paint when he's standing on the hill and he's like got his sword, the sword that's so big, I don't know how anybody fights with it, but he's like running down the hill. And where is he? I watch Game of Thrones too, if you like that show. Is he like Rob from Game of Thrones that's sitting in the tent with his little miniatures? Or is William Wallace out on the front lines right in front of everybody leading the charge? Where is he? He's on the front line. He's leading from the front. So I looked at the team and I said, okay, 6 months, it's not working the way we want. You guys all talk to clients. How many of you have gotten a client to go to a VC briefing? And I told Chad to be quiet because Chad does it every day. And we all at the same time kind of had the epiphany. We made the decision right then and there that if we're going to try to become something, if we're going to try to transition, we're going to try to do something hard, we had to get out in front and show everyone else that it was possible. Every one of the executives got a VC briefing in the next probably 3 or 4 weeks. At the time that we were focused on trying to get that business going, we had 1 VC briefing per month that we did. We now do 3 a week. We started with just Andreessen Horowitz and Greylock, and now Kleiner Perkins and Lightspeed are also involved. I just met with Sequoia. They're interested. These are some of the best VCs on the planet. It's honestly, it's like getting to meet Steven Spielberg at DreamWorks, right? Like these are the movie studios of our industry, and we now have access to them. But we realized that if we were going to sit in the back in the tent, this program would never get going. We had to step forward and lead from the front. So to close out, I want you to close your eyes again. Flurry, just keep them closed. I want you to give some thought to what it is you think you want your department to become, what it is you want your company to become. Are you healthy enough to do it? Are you willing to cannibalize the departments and the people and the products that you're going to need to cannibalize in order to pull it off? Are you going to have to set up some simple wins to get to the big wins? Appetizers before entrees. And will you be willing to lead from the front? Okay, so you're picturing what you guys are going to become. Now I want you to think of the planet Mars. So pretty and red. How many of you have heard of SpaceX? I think Ken's here, right? Ken, are you here? So SpaceX is a company started by Elon Musk, who's the founder of PayPal. And this is cool, right? SpaceX is a company that's launching rockets for NASA now and putting satellites up, and it's cool because he's trying to make the rockets all relaunchable, which I don't think anybody had ever tried before, and it's complicated, but he's just brilliant. I've joked that the US should give half of our GDP and just give it to Elon Musk and say, please stay and just make whatever you can make. He's that brilliant. So he has SpaceX. How many of you have heard of Tesla, that cool car company, right? That's him. Then he's got a lesser-known one called Solar City. Solar panels, for electric power. Every single one of those is an appetizer. Every one of them. Do you know what his entree is? He wants to colonize the planet Mars. That's what he wants to do. He's got to have a way to get there. He's got to have a way to get back, so he better be able to relaunch once he gets there. He's got to have a way to get around when he's there, electric vehicles. He's got to have a way to power those vehicles, Solar City. That's cool. And how smart is he to not necessarily be telling the whole world that that's the plan? Hey guys, imagine he just started, I decided after PayPal, I want to colonize a planet. What do you think? How many of you do that at work? You go in and you throw something out like that on the table. We're going to colonize the planet. Who's with me? Are you crazy? Doesn't it seem like maybe he could do it now? Do you kind of believe that maybe he could pull that off? Possibly one of the most impressive individuals I've ever heard of. So when you were thinking about what it was you were going to try to become, and you were thinking about how much pain and suffering you could go through as a leader trying to become that, it ain't like you're trying to colonize a planet. It's not that hard. If you take the steps that we've taken, I think it's completely possible. Thank you.